Greetings, Kindred. I am Voivode Maquette, and welcome back to our World of Darkness, where today we are going to continue our deep dive into blood sorcery, the discipline that has been completely absorbed into Quietus, strangely enough. I don't have a problem with that. I want more lore on the fact. I want to know where all the paths went and such. But from what I've been able to find, blood sorcery paths have been broken into a few ritual sets, and we will be getting to that today. But first, we need to go over what the core book says about blood magic rituals themselves, blood sorcery rituals themselves, because we get into the mechanics of how rituals work, and then we get into wards and ward circles, and then we actually get into the rituals. So let's go ahead and dig ourselves into what we have and what the core book has to say, shall we? Unless otherwise noted, performing a ritual requires a rouse check, 5 minutes per level to cast, and winning an intelligence plus blood sorcery test with a difficulty of the level +1. Rituals usually require additional ingredients, though some need only the uninterrupted concentration of the user, and often involve the mingling of blood with ingredients chosen according to the principles of sympathetic magic or alchemy. Unless otherwise stated, the caster can only perform beneficial rituals on themselves. So there's a lot to unwrap there. First off, I want to jump into the idea of what the difference is between alchemical magic and sympathetic magic. And that is, strangely enough, if you dig deep into it, the only two types of magic that there are. There are various different ways you can see it, but when you break down magic in general, the practice, what you are going to get are those two varieties of magic, which is alchemic, the mixing of substances and turning one thing into another by mixing substances. So cooking is alchemy, if you want to look at it that way. Or sympathetic magic, where you enact something to happen so that it happens. The idea of the Paleolithic hunting ritual cults who would create a model of a bison out of clay and hunt it down, stabbing the clay with spears to promote the fact that they were going to have a successful hunt. Or the idea of people wanting to produce higher crops, so they would stick a pole horse or a broomstick or something like that between their legs and ride around and jump in the fields to show the plants how high they wanted them to grow, which is, yes, where the myth of witches riding broomsticks actually came from. So, as you can see, there are those different types of magic. When you're looking at something such as a ritual that I just actually used in my game not too long ago, to reveal the trail of the prey, I believe is what it's called. I'm probably saying illuminate the trail of the prey. In that ritual, you take a long piece of ribbon, you soak it in your blood, and you set it on fire, emblazoning a path. You are causing that ribbon in your mind to cause a trail leading to the desired subject, so the prey. That would be a form of sympathetic magic, where thin blood alchemy is going to exactly be that. It's going to be alchemy, where you're taking ingredients and mixing them together. But we will cover all of that when we get to thin blood alchemy, when we're done with this. Next, wards. Talking about wards. The Tremere employ wards extensively, basing them on their Hermetic tradition sigils. Banu Haqim usually involve geometric or abjadic writings rather than occult symbols, but the methodology remains the same in both cases. Wards consist of glyphs or lines of script keyed to repel a single type of supernatural called the trespasser in these rules. When touched, They cause something like an electric shock to the trespasser's mind and body, imparting both physical burns and a sudden bout of sheer terror. The ward does not work on forced contact. A warded sword will not trigger when striking the trespasser, but it will if the trespasser tries to pick it up. So you can't just go, well, I warded this baseball and I'm smacking you in the face with it. That doesn't work. They'd have to pick it up for that to actually work. Wards can only cover a space about a meter across. For example, a caster cannot ward a whole car, but they can ward a steering wheel. The caster pours their blood on the object to be warded, tracing the glyph in it with their bare finger. Once the caster wipes the blood off, the ward becomes invisible. The ward lasts until the warded object is physically destroyed or broken. The trespasser cannot do this. That's actually something interesting to think about. I never really considered the fact that you can't see a ward. Whenever I think about the Tremere putting a ward on something, I always saw like, oh, there's going to be a symbol in blood on it. But the fact that when they wipe it off, that's the activation of it. I think it's actually from watching a lot of Supernatural with that damn angel glyph where they just like, pah, the wall, and it causes the angels to get bursted back to where they're going. All right, do not make a ritual roll until the first time the trespasser touches the ward, triggering its effect. Gloves or other garments offer no protection. If the caster wins the test, the victim suffers 1 point of aggravated health damage. On a critical win, damage for this ward is 3 points of aggravated damage. Damn. The caster does not need to make a ritual roll for each trespasser touching the ward. Only the first. That actually makes a lot of sense because it means that you don't find out if it works until somebody actually tries to touch it. But once somebody touches it and gets burned, I guess you could say, then you're reassured that it works at that point. Anyone affected who wants to touch the warded object, again, must spend a point of willpower and then win a stamina plus resolve test difficulty of 4 or 7 for a critical succeeded ward to make the attempt. Okay, so you actually need to like overcome the concept of touching it, not just physically grab a hold of it. So hence stamina, physical, resolve, mental to actually get to be able to do it again. Since the unseen, Auspex 1 can detect a ward with a contest of intelligence plus aspect versus the caster's intelligence plus blood sorcery. That's neat too, because it kind of gives like a little bit of a almost like a hiding of the ward. Wonder if it's actually considered intentional on that. Now, warding circles. That is the next thing. A warding circle resembles a regular ward painted on the ground or floor. It requires 3 times the ritual ingredients of the regular ward of the same type. Knowledge of one ward does not convey knowledge of its corresponding warding circle or vice versa. That's interesting. That's interesting. So just because you know how to do it compact doesn't mean that you know how to make a big one. Trespassers who attempt to cross the warding circle suffer its effect. Unless the caster inscribes the warding circle pointed inward around the trespasser in the first place, it does not block attempts to leave the circle. Its rules differ from regular wards in a few respects. It costs 3 rouse checks worth of blood to paint the circle and pentacles, which can cover up to a 3-meter radius. It takes 1 full night to cast, and a ritual roll made at the time at a +2 to difficulty, if the caster wants to last a year and a day. That's a pretty damn good time span. That's actually very big in the whole Hermetic teachings also, is that a year and a day tends to be how long magic would last. Otherwise, it dissipates at dawn. When the trespasser attempts to cross the circle, Roll a contest of intelligence plus blood sorcery versus the trespasser's willpower. If the storyteller or player wrote down the results of the original ritual roll used to cast a year-long warding circle, they can use that result here. That's cool. That's something you really need to keep track of, though. Like, I would suggest anybody who plays a blood sorcerer to keep a notebook of dates and just details. You need to keep a ledger on your warding circles. If the warding circle fails, the trespasser can enter it. If the caster wins, the trespasser takes 3 points of superficial damage, 3 points of aggravated damage on a critical win, and cannot enter. The trespasser must spend a point of willpower to attempt to enter the circle again. If the trespasser wins the contest, enters the circle, and leaves it again, they must repeat their half of the contest. The caster's initial result remains to re-enter it. That's neat. That's a lot of detail, and I don't remember any other system for Vampire the Masquerade having that, with the whole difference between wards and warding circles. I do like that. But it's also interesting on the idea that you can buy wards, such as Ward versus Ghoul, which is up here, but you have to buy it twice if you want to do a warding circle. So, getting into some actual blood sorcery rituals, we're going to start with level 1, Blood Walk. This ritual expands upon the power A Taste for Blood, allowing the user to learn more details about the subject studied, assuming the subject is a vampire. Ingredients: a silver cup filled with blood from the subject, 1 rouse check's worth. Process: the user mixes their blood with the subject's and repeats the incantation over the cup, spending roughly an hour. System: a win on the ritual roll allows the user to learn the generation and name of the subject, as well as the subject's sire. A critical win also informs the user of any blood bonds active on the subject, as regnant or thrall. That has always been an amazing ritual, being able to find out exactly who the sire is. But I like the fact that it goes in deeper and allows you to find out more information about blood bonds when it comes to that. That is where I can see a lot of Tremere coming in handy when it comes to the prince doing an investigation. But also I can see the Banu Haqim using this for the ability to track down not only a subject, but also to find out who may cause problems along the way due to the fact that you're hunting someone down. Knowing who is bloodbound to them, or who might seek compensation for who they're bloodbound to, could actually be something that really comes in handy. Level 1, Clinging of the Insect. The vampire gains the ability to cling to walls like a grotesque insect or spider. Ingredients: a living spider. Process: the caster fills a vial with their own blood and crushes the spider into it, mixing the ground bits with the blood before ingesting it. This does not refund any hunger gained. The caster can only perform this ritual on themselves. Others gain no benefit from drinking the mixture. That's actually probably a good thing for them to point out. System: a successful ritual yields the ability to cling to walls and ceilings for a scene, while a critical win extends the duration to a whole night. The caster must cling to the surface with both hands and feet. They move at approximately half their usual rate. I can't help but think about Nellie G from LA by Night when I read this, because she just uses that so damn much. But it's also become such an integral part of her character. Her fashion line that she runs is starting to be affected by it. In fact, I'm really surprised that she's not hunted down by Tremere, because she's an anarch toreador who knows blood sorcery. But It's so funny to watch her go through that stuff. But she takes a lot of liberties with it. Like, she preps it ahead of time. I think at one point in time, she just kind of like grabbed the spider, shoved it in her mouth, and bit her tongue or some shit like that. She doesn't really put as much effort into the ritualistic practice of doing this, especially since it says right here that it's going to take 5 minutes. So keep that in mind. Level 1, craft bloodstone. This ritual results in a bloodstone, a magical tracker to which the caster always knows the direction as well as the general distance. As the Camarilla retreats from modern technology, this previously neglected ritual has seen a resurgence in use. And that makes a lot of damn sense, considering the fact that being able to track people down for that kind of thing, to be able to know where people are without needing to use a cell phone makes a lot of sense. Ingredients: a pebble of iron ore, or a small magnet, a liter of blood from any source, and a silver bowl. They use a lot of silver bowls in blood sorcery. Process: the user spills their blood into the blood in the bowl, and then recites a chant over it for an hour, repeating the chant over the next 2 nights. The pebble, or magnet, absorbs the blood over the next 3 nights. Upon successful completion, the liquid appears translucent. You're actually looking at 5 nights of practice to perform this ritual. Not 5 minutes, 5 nights. You're spending a week creating a single bloodstone. Keep that in mind, storytellers. Seriously, that is one thing that I can see being taken advantage of, is not considering how long it actually takes to perform this one, because the general ritual rules state that it takes 5 minutes to do a single level ritual. Level 1, wake with evening's freshness. Performed before dawn, this ritual allows the caster to wake at any sign of danger, fully alert as if awakened during the night. Ingredients: the burnt bones or feathers of a rooster. This, by the way, I want to point out with those ingredients, that would be considered sympathetic magic, because you're taking something that our mentality has turned into a symbol of waking up. Roosters being able to wake at dawn. So just wanted to point that out. Anyway, process: the caster mixes the ashes with their own blood, drawing a circle with the mixture around their place of sleep. System: do not make a ritual roll unless true danger appears. If the caster is threatened during the day, make a ritual roll then, with the caster rousing on a win. For the duration of the scene, the vampire ignores the daytime penalties from staying awake. On a critical win, the effects last until the following dawn. That is amazing. That is something that can truly come in handy. Level 1, ward against ghouls. Weary Tremere created this ritual to protect themselves from the minions of vengeful rivals. This ward uses the standard rules for wards. Ingredients: nothing apart from the usual requirements of the caster's blood. So that makes sense. I mean, I like the idea that it gave it a little bit of a history there. Like, why would they create this if their ghouls are the ones who are going to be helping them with things during the day? Why would they create this? But the idea of being protected from another vampire's ghouls who could attack during the day, that is something to take into consideration, especially with the idea of Tzimisce ghouls being so angry with them. Keep in mind, during the Omen Wars, which was the massive war between the Tremere and the Tzimisce, the Ventru were in on that. The Bruja were in on that. The Toreador were in on that. Everybody wanted to kill the Tremere at this point. Level 2, communicate with Kindred Sire. The caster uses the bond between sire and child to open a bridge between minds, allowing the child to create a telepathic link for the purpose of long-distance communication. As with other rituals, this one sees a resurgence in these nights of wiretaps and electronic surveillance. Ingredients: an object previously possessed by the sire and a silver bowl filled with clear water. Process: the caster submerges the object in water and lets their blood drip into the bowl, concentrating upon the last memory of their sire for up to 30 minutes. System: make the ritual roll after 15 minutes have passed. A win allows for 10 minutes of two-way silent mental communication once 15 more minutes have passed. A critical win allows immediate communication. Any major disturbance on either end breaks the connection. Now, I could very well be wrong because, again, I didn't really play Tremere very often, and having Thaumaturgy as a Tzimisce was more just a status statement. I didn't use it very often, except for Neptune's Might and Vines of Dionysus. I like to make people drunk and drown them. Anyway. But I could swear that Communicate with Kindred Sire was a level 1 ritual at one time. I don't care that it's gone up, due to the fact that the Tremere have a lot of level 1, or due to the fact that Blood Sorcerers already have a good amount of level 1s. If I am wrong and if it was a level 2, then oh well. But actually, considering the fact that I played LARP and there were no level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4s, there was nothing like that. There was basic, intermediate, and advanced. That probably is why I am thinking that, now that I think about it. But the idea of being able to do this also, we never followed the guidelines that it had to be the sire. We always said that it could be anybody who you have an item of. Like anybody, if you have in your possession something that belonged to somebody else, you would be able to call them. But it was most commonly used to and developed to contact sires, and therefore that's why it was called that. Level 2, Eyes of Babel. By ingesting the tongue and eye of a person, the caster gains the ability to read and speak any language known by the victim. Ingredients: a fresh eye and a tongue of a person. Process: plucking the ingredients fresh from the victim. The vampire chews and swallows them. This most likely incurs a stain. System: the rouse check required for this ritual allows for the supernatural dissolution of the ingredients once swallowed. Once this is done, make the ritual roll. A win gives the caster the ability to read and speak any language known by the victim at the same skill level for a week. A critical win extends the duration of a month. I gotta say, first off, this is the same ritual that was used by Karna in the opening story of the last video. But I have gotta say, the length of this is mind-boggling. I love the fact that it lasts a week or a month if you hit a crit. That is fucking insane. When I first read this, not thinking, like, when I first heard about this ritual, I really thought it was be for the evening. But given what you're taking from people, especially if you don't kill them, I love the fact that it is extended longer than a single evening. Level 2, Illuminate the Trail of the Prey. The ritual allows the caster to perceive the previous whereabouts of a designated person as a subtly glowing trail, visible only to them. Ingredients: a white satin ribbon. Process: the performer of the ritual soaks the ribbon in their own blood, setting it alight. System: if the ritual roll is a win, the ribbon catches fire despite being wet, burning fiercely like a fuse. Once consumed, the ritual takes effect. While this ritual remains active, the caster can follow faint traces of the target even in areas where they left no tracks, such as crowded cities. To follow the tracks, the caster makes an intelligence plus survival roll against the difficulty equal to 6, minus the margin of the ritual test. The target must be known by face by the caster, who sees the path traveled by the victim over the previous 24 hours. The path remains visible for the entire night. A critical win extends this to 2 nights. I'm pretty sure when this ritual was first created, it was in the Sabbat guide, which makes a lot of sense considering everything. The idea of the Tremere using this is, yes, I can see that, but I also primarily see this being used in the Sabbat for hunting down specific victims and things like that. But moving on. Level 2, Truth of Blood. Until recently known only to the Banu Haqim viziers, this ritual creates a mystic potion capable of shifting lies from truth. This ritual has power enough even to sometimes uncover facts unknown to the speaker. Ingredients: 1 pint of blood from the subject. Process: the performer of the ritual mixes their own blood with that of the subject in a vessel large enough to allow for the dipping of the fingers. System: instead of a regular ritual roll, the caster immerses their fingers in the mixture and makes a resolve plus blood sorcery versus composure plus occult for every statement made by the subject. The first failed contest ends the ritual. A win tells them whether the statement is true, as far as the subject knows. On a critical win by the caster, the subject involuntarily expands upon their answer, providing more information, including details they glancingly saw or subconsciously forgot. The storyteller should inform the caster if there is no more information about that topic. The mixture bubbles and seethes during the process, turning completely to ash at the end of the scene. The ritual cannot pierce cloud memory, the forgetful mind, or other memory-wiping powers. The caster may well guess the cause of the blank or foggy recollection, but cannot recover the actual memory. That's a fun ritual. I like Bone of Lies more, which I don't know if it's actually in this. You take a severed finger bone, and who's ever holding it, if they tell you a lie, it darkens, and they have to tell you the truth, and you can get 10 lies out of them. It's pretty cool. I've actually used it in a V5 game, so we've homebrewed the rules on that one. Level 2, Ward Against Spirits. This ritual wards an item against incorporeal beings such as wraiths, ghosts, and elemental spirits. Any attempt by them to manipulate or pass through the item triggers the effect. This ward uses the standard rules for wards. Ingredients: a handful of salt, in some versions a handful of brick dust, mixed with the blood. That's interesting. I like how they kind of went multicultural on that one. The idea of either using salt as a purifying agent that wraiths can't trespass through, or the idea of using brick dust, which psychically builds a wall between the wraith and what they're trying to get at. So I do like that. Level 3, Warding Circle Against Ghouls. This ritual creates a circular ward on the floor or ground intended to prevent the passage of ghouls. This ward uses the standard rules for warding circles. Ingredients: the caster draws the warding circle with a human bone dipped in the blood. Alright, cool. So it expands upon it. I like the idea of what it says that you have to use to do the ritual too. So that's very interesting. Level 3, Dagon's Call. A terrifying technique employed by the assassins of the Banu Haqim. This ritual lets the user rupture the very blood vessels of the victim from afar, having only touched them but briefly previously. Mortals expire rather messily, and even vampires fear this silent killer. Ingredients: a gold inlaid ceremonial dagger. Fancy. Process: before proceeding with the ritual, The victim must be exposed to the caster's blood, either by drinking it or having it touched an open wound or even their bare skin. A single drop smeared across the arm is enough. After an hour, but before a week has passed, the caster can perform the ritual by piercing their own skin with the ceremonial dagger, shedding blood. As their blood hits the ground, the ritual takes effect. System. Make a resolve plus blood sorcery versus stamina plus resolve roll. Every point of margin on a win does a point of damage to the victim, as their blood vessels burst and their lungs fill with blood. This damage is aggravated for mortals, but only superficial on vampires. The caster can repeat this process up to 2 more times, each time requiring them to make an additional rouse check. This was originally just part of Quietus, if I remember properly. I think it was an intermediate Quietus. And being able to recall the blood, I believe, was the way that it was put out. Almost like Thefta Vitae, but more violent. I like this version, and I think it works better ritualistically than just as a discipline. Level 3, Deflection of Wooden Doom. By performing this ritual, the vampire protects themselves from being staked. The first stake that would pierce their heart shatters before penetrating their skin. Ingredients: wooden splinters or shavings. Process: the vampire mixes the shavings with their blood and draws a circle around themselves. They must then meditate in this circle for an hour, concluding by placing 1 splinter of wood under their tongue. System: make no ritual roll until the vampire is staked. If the ritual roll is a win, the stake shatters as it touches the skin of the vampire. A critical win blinds the attacker for 2 turns, showering their face with splinters. This only works on genuine attempts at staking. Merely holding the stake against the vampire does not trigger the effect. The protection lasts until the end of the night, or until the splinter is removed from under the tongue of the vampire, whichever comes first. Deflection of Wooden Doom was always part of the Tremere. There was that whole, like, you can't stake those little assholes for one reason or another. I do like the additive of not only the details on how to perform the ritual, because in the old days it was place a splinter under your tongue, you can't be staked. That's it. And I think it was like you get staked in the stake ashes. But the fact that now there's an added, if you crit, it explodes and blinds the staker, that just adds a whole new level of entertainment value to this ritual. Level 3, Essence of Air. The caster creates a potion that, when imbibed, allows for limited flight. The Camarilla frown upon the use of this ritual due to the extreme risk of masquerade breaches. For this reason, its popularity has lessened considerably in modern nights. Ingredients: leaves and berries of belladonna. Process: the caster steeps the belladonna in their blood, reducing the brew over a brazier while incanting words of power. System: make a ritual roll when reducing the mixture. A critical win prepares 2 doses worth of potion. The caster can tell whether the ritual succeeded, so they won't end up with a dud. The resulting black potion retains its potency for a night and activates when imbibed. The potion enables the caster, and only them, to fly or hover at approximately a running speed for a scene. The caster can carry a human-sized mass, though their speed drops to walking speed. Grabbing and carrying aloft an unwilling subject or pulling the flyer to the ground both require a contest between the caster's strength plus blood sorcery and the other's strength plus athletics. This is interesting, and it really does call the mind movement of the mind, because where being able to move things telekinetically was something that was always nice about movement of the mind. I think a lot of people just they took that power because they wanted to fly. Because being able to snare or levitate or fly was always the thing that I know I was very interested in having. Level 3, Firewalker. A powerful ritual to perform. This allows the caster to make themselves and even their comrades resistant to fire. Ingredients: a fingertip of the caster. Process: the vampire cuts one of their fingertips off and burns it together with their blood in a golden chalice or bowl. System: make a stamina plus resolve test difficulty of 3 to cut off a fingertip. On a winning ritual roll, a bluish flame consumes the blood and fingertip, signaling the completion of the ritual. For the rest of the night, fire damage to the caster is halved. This ritual can be performed on others, but the fingertips sacrificed must all belong to the caster. Suck. The mutilation is not enough to count as damage to the caster. The fingertip regrows during day sleep. I'm really glad they pointed that out because, like, what if you didn't know that? Like, what if you didn't regrow your fingertips? I can do this ritual 10 times. Unless, like, everybody wants to go and then it's once. Suck. Level 3. Ward against lupines. This ritual wards an item against werewolves in any form. Any attempt by them to touch the item triggers the effect. This ward uses the standard rules for wards. Ingredients: a handful of silver dust mixed with the blood. That's it. This ritual is pretty straightforward. I kind of appreciate that. I really kind of wish there were more like this, because even the wards, I mean, most of the wards are pretty much the same thing. They're just different targets, and the fact that they're different levels kind of makes sense, because ward versus ghoul, which is a level 1, is going to be a lot easier to work just due to the sheer strength of the target on that one, of the victim, if you want to put it that way, even though they're technically the aggressors in this point. But a ward versus lupine makes sense to be a level 3, if not higher. Level 3, warding circle against spirits. This ritual creates a circular ward on the floor or ground intended to prevent the passage of spirits. Although more difficult than some warding circles, it is one of the most commonly found in grimoires and other sources. A human occultist could potentially reconstruct a functioning version of this ritual with an intelligence plus occult test difficulty of 6, though they could not cast it without vitae or some other supernatural aid or element. This ward uses the standard rules for warding circles. Ingredients: the caster draws the warding circle with an iron knife dipped in salt and blood. That is very neat that they said that humans could learn how to do this. And I wonder what they mean by element, by supernatural element. Could you use the blood of a werewolf to create this kind of thing? What are the possibilities of that? Now, obviously, that's storyteller discretion, but that does strike interest with how vague the ingredients are on that one. Level 4, defense of the sacred haven. The performer of this powerful ritual can ward their haven against the sun itself, protecting their resting place from penetration by its destructive rays, as a mystical darkness blankets the area. Ingredients: nothing but the blood of the caster. Process: the caster inscribes a number of sigils and glyphs on and around the area to be protected. They must take special care on windows and doorways, but may even ward an open doorway if the area is indoors. The ritual wards gray or liminal areas, such as ruins, at storyteller discretion. System: the process takes an hour or more, depending on the state of the area to be warded. The area can be no larger than a circle with a 6-meter radius. It's actually not that big. It's pretty big, but it's not that big. The ritual automatically fails if the caster steps out of the circle at any time after the warding is complete. The caster makes the ritual roll once the sun rises. On a win, shadow blankets the area, closing off any view of the outside, but also preventing any sun damage to the vampire within. On a critical win, those inside can spy the outside world dimly. The ritual lasts through an entire day unless ended by the caster stepping outside the area. Considering how long it takes to cast that ritual, it kind of sucks. Because I'm just thinking about how long it actually would take to do this. It's going to take about 20 minutes to actually cast this ritual, and it only lasts for the night. I really do see this being something more of a special circumstances kind of thing. I don't know. I've never really been that impressed by Defense of the Sacred Haven. Just put some light canceling curtains up. Don't bother with this. I mean, if you think of a good reason, I'm sure you can. But Level 4, Eyes of the Nighthawk. Related to the primitive powers of animalism, this ritual allows the caster to possess a carnivorous fowl. It just makes it sound like a chicken. I can't help but see like a regent for the Tremere as a chicken. Sorry. Usually a raven or a bird of prey, directing its flight and seeing through its eyes. Parrots and maenades, not being carnivorous, cannot be used in this ritual. Some Tremere spend years training crows or ravens to speak before using them as nighthawks. With the pyramid disrupted, warlocks have the spare time now. Ingredients: the eyes of the bird used, taken at the conclusion of the ritual. Process: the caster feeds their blood to the bird and enters a trance. System: on a winning ritual roll, the caster can control the bird and see through its eyes. On a critical win, the bird can perform simple actions under control, such as picking up objects, manipulating keys or dials. The caster can use most non-physical disciplines through the bird, even dominate, assuming the caster has telepathy, or some other way to communicate with targets non-verbally. There's no limit to the range the bird can fly, though unless the caster plucks the eyes out of the bird at the end of the night, they themselves suffer blindness for 3 nights to come. That's interesting, and considering there's now an option, I wonder how I would do that. Like, this kind of seems like just me as a person, I'd be like, well, I'm using this ritual, I guess I'm going to be blind for 3 days. This is something to do at the very beginning of your downtime actions. Level 4, Incorporeal Passage. The caster assumes an incorporeal state, not unlike a ghost, able to freely pass through objects, and rendered totally immune to physical damage. They cannot interact physically with the material world except by sight and speech. Ingredients: a mirror. Process: the caster spills their blood on the mirror, chanting, and then breaks it. System: make a ritual roll. If the roll is a win, the caster assumes an incorporeal form as long as they hold a shard of the broken mirror. While incorporeal, the caster remains immune to everything except fire, sunlight, and arcane weapons, and rituals capable of damaging spirits. The caster can still be seen and heard, but cannot interact physically with anything or anyone. They cannot rouse the blood while incorporeal. Incorporeal casters have no access to any spirit realm. The ritual does not make them wraiths or spirits. The caster can walk through walls and other objects, but must do so in a straight line. They cannot change direction while inside solid matter. This ritual lasts for 1 scene or until the caster drops the shard. Returning to the material while inside solid matter can result in anything from destruction to entombment to minor inconveniences. The ashtray is stuck halfway through the caster's arm. The storyteller decides the precise outcome. I think that's hilarious. The idea of them walking through something and not realizing that that something is inside of them when they re-solidify. That sucks, but funny. Level 4, ward against Canites. This ritual wards an item against all vampires except the caster. Any attempt by them to touch the item triggers the effect. However, a vampire examining the ward with Auspex can read the name of the caster in it with a successful contest of intelligence plus Auspex versus the caster's intelligence plus blood sorcery. This ward uses the standard rules for wards. Ingredients: ash, warm from a still burning fire. Caster risks terror frenzy and cannot inscribe the ward that night if they succumb to it. Level 4, warding circle against lupines. This ward uses the standard rules for warding circles. Ingredients: the caster draws a warding circle with a silver knife dipped in wolfsbane and blood. Very simple ruling on that one. I want some rules for lupines. I really do. I cannot wait until W5 comes out. I'm hesitant to use werewolf in my game until after I see that. Level 5, escape to true sanctuary. By preparing 2 mystic circles in an arduous ritual, the caster can instantly travel from one to the other. The journey is one way, and the caster must designate one circle for departure, while the arrival circle serves as an exit. Ingredients: 2 charred circles approximately a meter in diameter. Process: the caster burns the circle into the ground or floor with an open flame, then consecrates each circle. Consecration requires 2 hours of chanting per night and 2 rouse checks for 3 consecutive nights. In total, this ritual takes 12 rouse checks worth of blood from the caster. Damn. That's hefty. System: once the circles are complete, the caster need but step into one designated for departure and concentrate for a turn, making a ritual roll. The caster makes a ritual roll each time they attempt to travel, but can only make 1 attempt per scene. On a win, the caster vanishes, reappearing in an instant in the middle of the exit circle. There is no limit to the distance between 2 circles, but they must be inscribed on the ground or on the floor of a building, not on a floor of a vehicle. The caster can transport 1 person or an object or objects totaling roughly human mass with them. Damaging either circle ruins the ritual completely and renders both circles inert. A vampire can only have 1 pair of these circles functional at any given time. This seems like something like the Tremere would definitely have, like if the Vienna chantry wasn't fucked. This just seems like something that they would have in all chantries, just in case they had to get someone. They had to like go in and actually like retrieve another Tremere. Level 5, Heart of Stone. Performing this ritual turns the caster's unliving heart to stone. This makes them immune to stakes, but also, through some fluke of sympathetic magic, completely remorseless and cold-hearted automatons. Totally unreceptive to emotional and social cues, even more than normal. Even more than normal. I love that. That's fucking hilarious. Ingredients: a stone slab and a wax candle drenched with the blood of the caster. Process: the caster lies on a stone slab with the candle on their chest, letting it burn down to nothing over the course of the night. As the fire reaches their chest, it causes 1 point of aggravated damage and forces a terror frenzy roll difficulty of 3. If the caster fails the frenzy roll, the ritual ends. If the caster does not enter frenzy, they make the ritual roll. On a win, the ritual completes. On a critical win, heals the candle fire damage. That's a nice little benefit there. The effect persists indefinitely, and should the caster wish to reverse the process, they must repeat the ritual. System. While under the effect of this ritual, the caster's heart is literally made of stone. Stakes fail to penetrate it, breaking if forced. The caster also exhibits a complete emotional detachment, subtracting 3 dice from any remorse rolls, as well as active, not resisting, social-related rolls, except for intimidation and dominate. The caster cannot employ presence, but gains 3 bonus dice to pools used to resist the effects of that discipline. That ritual seems to me to have gained so much more in this writing of it. I think originally I remember that it was very similar, but the idea of complete and total detachment. I like to see people play this, truthfully. It's one of those things where you might have a vampire who does this for protection. Not even just being staked, but the idea of like getting that side effect active. I need to do something where I need to be level-headed. The problem with that is they would find themselves to be more efficient in that matter, and then reversing the ritual is something they probably would not do because they wouldn't have the emotional ties to make them. Food for thought. Level 5. Shaft of Belated Disillusion. The Kindred fear few weapons as they fear the dreaded stake created by this ritual. Thought to be the origin of the myth regarding stakes as the ultimate tool for slaying vampires, the Shaft of Belated Disillusion not only seeks out the heart of the vampire it's aimed at, but actually causes final death when reaching its target. If need be, the shaft works towards this goal as a splinter, inching its way through the target's body to reach its goal. Ingredients: a stake carved of rowan wood, inscribed with baneful runes. Process: the caster drenches the stake with 2 rouse checks worth of their blood while blackening it in an oak wood fire while reading incantations over it. The ritual takes 5 hours to complete. System: this stake confers a 3 dice bonus to any pool on any attempt to stake a vampire. Whether hammered in while the victim sleeps, wielded in melee, or fired from a crossbow, the caster need not wield the stake themselves. If the attack roll wins with a margin of 5 or better, the vampire withers to dust in a single turn, as if consumed by an invisible fire. If the stake hits, but the roll has insufficient margin under 5 to pierce the heart, the stake breaks off in the wound, the tip burying itself as it slowly begins to inch its way toward the heart of the victim. Depending on where it's stuck, this can take hours or nights, but unless extracted by medical or mystical means, final death is assured. To remove it surgically, someone other than the victim needs to win a roll of dexterity plus medicine, difficulty of 6. In the process, that takes up to 4 hours. If no medical expertise can be found, someone can remove the splinter by severing the affected limb, unless the splinter has already reached the torso. Fuck! This is an instant kill. Like, it takes time, but like, this could very well just be the death of a character with a simple physical challenge. Shit. I don't remember it being this bad. I remember Shaft of Belated Quintessence, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong, but that staked a person. It didn't kill them. Jesus. Level 5. Warding Circle against Canites. This ward uses the standard rules of warding circles. Ingredients: the caster draws the warding circle with a rowan wand dipped in a mixture of ash from a still burning fire and blood. It is that simple. It's a level 5 ritual. But Obviously, the warding circle has to be learned. The idea of that being a thing, though, is just mind-boggling to me. I'm still on Shaft of Belated Disillusions. The Ward versus K-Knights really isn't that big of a deal to me. It really isn't. But the idea, the last one is holy shit. All right. So, we get to move on now to another book. Let's just go ahead and put this away. And right now I'm looking at the Guide to the Camarilla for Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, where I am looking at the Banu Haqim section. Level 2, Ishtar's Touch. The Blood Sorcerer can convert a dose of their own vitae into a touch-activated narcotic that renders a victim uninhibited and vulnerable to disciplines such as Presence and Dominate, along with attempts at mundane manipulation, coercion, and interrogation. Ingredients: a small amount of hashish or other narcotic substance. Process: the chosen substance is mixed with the user's blood and rubbed between their fingers. As the incantation is read or whispered, the ritual only takes a couple of minutes to prepare. System: the user makes a ritual roll versus stamina plus resolve of the target's mortal or vampire after they make contact with the affected vitae. For the remainder of the scene, the victim suffers a dice penalty equal to the margin of win on the ritual roll on all resist pools involving composure and resolve. Apply the penalty only once in case the pool involves both attributes. Their narcotic vitae retains its potency until it is touch, up until the end of the scene. Very good interrogation tool on that one. It kind of feels like Vines of Dionysus, where you just kind of like make people lose their inhibitions and stuff, but the idea that it is, it feels very old school Assamite sorcerer. So good on the Banu Haqim for adding that one. Level 3, One with the Blade. The Banu Haqim connection to the delivery of harm and death is such that they can speak to a weapon and command it to strike with increased accuracy and lethality. Many Banu Haqim are known for their dedicated weapons, which in some cases are carried with them for centuries of use. Such a weapon never rusts or dulls as long as it remains in the vampire's possession. If someone else physically claims it as their own, it ages, much as a ghoul denied vitae would. In the case the weapon is still usable following this degeneration, if it is used against the original owner, the Blood Sorcerer, it inflicts grievous harm in retribution for them having lost it. Ingredients: a melee weapon and enough of the caster's vitae to fully immerse it. Process: the vampire submerges their chosen weapon in their own vitae and speaks a mantra dedicating their life to the weapon. The weapon must remain submerged without interruption until the following sunrise. System: once the blood is exsanguinated and the weapon is submerged, make a ritual roll. On a win, the weapon becomes mystically dedicated to the user. It remains of immaculate quality unless subjected to focused harm when outside the caster's ownership. Additionally, if anointed by the blood of the user, it gains 2 dice bonus when used in combat. The anointment takes a single turn, forces a rouse check, and lasts for a full scene. A vampire can never possess more than one weapon dedicated in this way. In order to perform this ritual on a new weapon, the previous dedicated weapon must be destroyed first. The vampire with this weapon must ensure it never leaves their possession. If stolen and used against them, it cannot gain any additional dice, but deals aggravated damage to its owner, the one who originally performed the ritual. That is a very kick-ass thing. I love the idea of the dedicated weapon. In 2nd edition, before we got into 5th edition, they started talking about Assamites that were of different cultures, and that they would choose to have a weapon that was personal to them, culturally relevant. And the idea of using this on other weapons other than what you would typically consider a Banu Haqim to use is a very interesting thing. And what I mean by that is like warhammers and things. But yeah, this is a very neat ritual, and I'm very glad that it has been included in that. And now, boys and girls, we move on to Cults of the Blood Gods, where we're going to be taking a little bit of step back in this due to the fact that we have some new information here. We are going to start visiting areas of old thaumaturgy which has been converted from paths to rituals. That being said, let's just take a look at what it says about the new rituals in this section of the book for the Bihari. The Lilin teach each other uncommon powers that, while not exclusive to the Bihari, are rare beyond their ranks. When Bihari hear of other vampires practicing these arts of blood, they're quick to pay a visit to the kindred involved and find out if they represent another chapter of the cult, or if they've stolen these gifts from a more worthy vampire. Bihari blood sorcery exists in the form of rituals, with the roles required detailed in the core book of Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, and still requires dots in blood sorcery, unless noted otherwise. So you still have to know blood sorcery before you can use this, which makes me think of the idea of Banu Haqim that are escaped from the Sabbat, who had followed the path of Lilith, or possibly Tremere and Tribu, who have brought these things into the practices of the Bihari themselves. Now, saying that, we're going to go into 2 rituals for this, which are Coax the Garden and Eden's Bounty. These are important because the Bihari are known as the Tenders of the Garden. Level 1, Coax the Garden. This ritual allows the caster to bring plant life, such as shoots, grass, and tree branches, to act in their defense. Ingredients: human blood and poppy seeds. Process: the vampire casts a concoction of human blood and poppy seeds onto the ground, and in so doing, rouses all plant life within 5 yards or meter diameter. While these plants are rarely lethal in their attack, they can successfully disable and alarm their victims. System: a win on a ritual roll following the casting of the ritual ingredients animates the plant life. The affected flora causes a 2 dice penalty to physical dice pools for those caught in the range of the ritual, as plants trip and grip the victim. Victims who stay in the area for longer than a turn must make a dexterity plus athletics roll, difficulty of 3, or be grabbed and suffer 2 points of superficial health damage for each turn ensnared. If the caster achieves a critical win, the damage from the plant attacks are doubled. On a total failure, the plants attack the caster. The plant will target anyone who isn't the caster. They remain active until the end of the scene. So, this is obviously the green path of thaumaturgy. The fact that they gave that to the Bihari makes a lot of sense, considering who they are and what they do. But it is a very interesting thing. I can really see, and I've stated this before, I can see the idea of the Tremere infiltrating the groups that have these powers to get at least a reflection of the power back that they've lost. Level 5, Eden's Bounty. This rare ritual allows vampires to drain blood and energy from any living creature in the nearby area, allowing the caster to stave off hunger without even having to bare their fangs. Ingredients: a dead body, a living tree, 1 fresh apple, and 1 rotten apple. Process. The vampire lay a dead body. Age of the corpse is immaterial. At the foot of a tree and places a healthy apple in the corpse's mouth, followed by a rotten apple into the vampire's. If the apple does not fit in the corpse's mouth, the caster may hammer it in and dislocate the jaw, or otherwise rend the throat open, as long as it fits. As the body rapidly merges with the tree roots and trunk, blood from mortals up to 1 mile or a kilometer away drains into the earth and out through the rotten apple in the vampire's mouth, sating hunger. System. The player makes a ritual roll following the placement of the corpse and the apple. On a win, the vampire's hunger is slaked by 1, despite any blood potency feeding penalties. On a critical win, the vampire's hunger is slaked to 0 without killing. On a total failure, the vampire falls into a hunger frenzy. Depending on the number of kine in the ritual area and the type of kine nearby, stains may occur. For example, vampires with a prey exclusion may suffer stains if the ritual is used in an area heavily populated by their excluded class of mortal, whereas varied groups with more kine to draw from are less likely to bear an ethical cost. A lot of blood is wasted with this ritual, and all the mortals in the area lose a little blood to the earth, though the loss is not visible. For the remainder of the chapter, those kind suffer a 1 die penalty in all physical rolls, and a 1 aggravated health damage. Resonance from this form of consumption are fleeting, unless a large number of mortals in the area possess the same resonance, such as sanguine at a rave or melancholic at a memorial ceremony, etc. This is such an interesting ritual because I can't think of anything from the earlier versions that is like this, except for 1 level of Ogum, which allows you to feed from the life of the earth in the area. But being able to take a corpse, no matter the age of the corpse, so you can dig up one as long as it's there, and do this, and I suggest crab apples, because they're tiny. Being able to perform this ritual, just have blood pump into your mouth when you bite into an apple, is such an interesting way of going about it that I can see a lot of Lilin becoming addicted to this type of feeding. Because it really is easy, especially if you're in a well-populated area. Now we move to what happened to the Lure of Flames. The Lure of Flames is a thaumaturgical embodiment of victory over fear. Pioneered by vampires of Clan Tremere, the Church of Cain heavily uses these powers as part of their sacrament and their arsenal against enemies of the faith. It is both a way to protect oneself from the bane of fire and the weapon used to instill both injury and terror in the enemy. This form of blood sorcery exists in the form of rituals, with the roles required detailed in Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition core book, unless noted otherwise. Level 1. Dampen the fear. This ritual allows the caster to briefly douse their natural vampiric fear of fire. Ingredients: a holy object, such as a crucifix, Bible, or the Quran. Process: the vampire must burn the holy symbol before walking into, past, or otherwise interacting with fire. The object does not need to be destroyed, just exposed to the fire. System: a successful ritual roll following the burning of the object grants the character 2 dice on all rolls related to resisting Rorschach. A critical win results in the character needing to make no terror frenzy rolls at all. The power wears off once the scene ends. This is such a very interesting look at it because I've always thought that this should be the first level of Lure of Flames, even if it wasn't ritualized. Even if It was just you burn a blood or you spend a willpower. Like in the old systems before rouse checks, if you burned a blood or spend a willpower trait to just not suffer from fire fear. This always seemed accurate to me because, and I've spoken with people who are more Tremere inclined than I am, and they've agreed with me, including people who are obsessively Tremere, that most path disciplines for thaumaturgy are completely and utterly fucking useless. And what I mean by that is they describe them in a fashion where you're just spending XP to get to the next level. Like, there might be 2 or 3 important things in the path. Laura Flames being the best example of that one. The first level, you can catch your hands on fire, giving yourself effectively fire-branded feral claws. Okay. Second level, you can now throw that fire. Those 2 could be condensed into 1 level first off, because you have to make the fire and then throw it, but most storytellers never even enforced that. Most storytellers never went, oh, you have to make the fire first and then throw it. They just went, I'm throwing fire all over the goddamn place. And then there's the concept of the pillar of fire. Engulf. They might as well be the same damn thing. Wall of fire. Rain of fire. Really all you need is Hand to Flame with the addition of being able to throw things. Engulf. Give them that one where you're just calling fire at a distance. And then Rain of Fire. You really don't even need anything else than that in the older systems. The rest of the stuff was just filler. So 3 levels, you're done. I've actually discussed it with other people. Also, Daviga 31 being the main source of conversations when it comes about thaumaturgy, because he is dedicated to this discipline. And I believe that this is his one thing that he doesn't like about V5 is what they've done to thaumaturgy. Check out my first Metaplot Monday of what the fuck happened to thaumaturgy when it came to this. But he agrees that, like, you should have Path of Blood, which is your basis for all thaumaturgy. You get 5 levels. And then every path after that should have just been a basic, an intermediate, and an advanced, where you charge the same cost as a level 1, a level 3, or a level 5. You don't really need to have 1 through 5 on these things. But I'm getting into my old rant. We are supposed to be studying on the subject. So, level 3, Fire in the Blood. This ritual allows the vampire to invoke the anguish of fire in the victim's blood. Blistering heat emerges from the target's veins and causes intense pain. The power from this ritual differs from Cauldron of Blood in that it is usable from a distance and an efficient way to incapacitate rather than kill the victim. Ingredients: a sample of the target's blood, a visual depiction of the target such as a photo, painting, or a video recording, a candle made from red wax, or a lighter made of iron. Process: the vampire concentrates on the visual depiction of the target, which can be the individual in person, and burns the target's blood sample, usually held in a petri dish, glass bottle, or a vial over the flame. The effect occurs almost immediately as the victim's blood heats up in their veins. System: the player makes a ritual roll following the incantation versus the target's resolve plus occult or resolve plus fortitude if the target is a creature who has that discipline. Each point of the vampire's margin is applied as superficial health damage that also inflicts racking pain upon the victim, forcing them to incur a -2 dice penalty to physical pulls for the remainder of the scene. On a critical win, the penalty increases to a -3. A kindred target must make a rouse check due to the damage to their vitae. This is very interesting because it's a fire-based attack, an internal fire-based attack, but it only does superficial damage, not aggravated. But the idea of heating the blood so that it boils doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to take aggravated damage, due to the fact that there are degrees between degrees. There's the idea of this water is room temperature, this water is warm, this water is hot, this water is boiling, this water is scalding. So you do have to take in consideration that you're not actually looking at fire, you're looking at heating the blood to the point where it is boiling inside their veins, which could cause varying effects depending on how hot it is. So I can accept the fact that that's superficial. And I also I enjoy that very much, that it's more of a toned down version of Cauldron of Blood. Level 5, Creatio Ignis. The caster of this ritual diverts hungry flame from their flesh, using an enchanted coating of vitae like a buffer that can set items and people alight using the fire. This ritual is a phenomenal breach of the masquerade, as the power is entirely visible and can cause intense environmental feedback. Not to mention the bloody coating on the caster's hands before activation. Ingredients: sufficient vitae from any vampire to coat the caster's arms up to the elbows. A source of flame, such as a lighter. Process: the vampire immerses their arms in the blood and withstands the urge to feed or frenzy. If using their own vitae for this, it compels 3 rouse checks. After extracting their arms, exposure to flame will ignite the vitae rather than the vampire it coats. The vampire can go on to set targets alight, using the fire on their skin. System: if the user is at hunger of 4 or more, make a hunger frenzy test at difficulty of 3 to avoid draining the ingredients. At any point during the night, they may expose the vitae to fire and make a ritual roll. A wind ignites flames on the vampire's hands and arms, which, in a spectacular display, provoke terror frenzies of a difficulty of 2 in all nearby vampires except the caster. They may touch others with dexterity plus brawl in physical combat to inflict 2 aggravated health damage. Entering a grapple ignites the other person's clothes, continuing to damage each turn until a composure plus survival roll, difficulty of 3, is won to end the burn. The caster is only resistant to flame on their arms and will burn as usual elsewhere. The fiery arms extinguish when the caster wills it, or when the scene ends. That is interesting. Barely any of this, we've got 3 levels. Barely any of this seem what we know as Lure of Flames, where you're throwing fire and shit, which is kind of sad. I do miss the ability to throw fireballs, but there's also no reason why players can't invent their own rituals, which is something that should be encouraged anyway, as long as they have like a high level of occult or something like that. But I do have to say that it is very interesting that the Tremere are said to have invented this still. So there's no reason why Tremere players can't take these rituals and continue on being practitioners of Lure of Flame in a V5 setting. Alright everybody, and here we are within the Chicago Folios. We're going to find yet more blood sorcery rituals. But since this is actually my first time looking into this, except for seeing what the names of some of these things are, I'm kind of a little excited to just go over these with you. So bear with me as we go over the entire Chicago Folios blood sorcery rituals. Blah. Here we go. Ooh, a quote. "You can study much better in blissful solitude than with an entire chantry of apprentices whining about how you haven't fed them in a week." Abraham justifies the Tremere clan split to himself. Awesome. You don't need people. I understand. So actually, that brings me to a very interesting thing that I've been meaning to mention for a long time. Or I guess not that long, but since it came out, the V2 book that came out, which is an extension for Vampire the Masquerade 20th edition, on the page that starts talking about the Tremere, there is a quote by Regent North, Dr. North. Dr. North is, that quote was actually taken from Daviga 31. So if anybody wants to see one of the characters that ran through the Thicker Than Water game in one of its past iterations, with Daviga 31 being the player of that, please check that out. It is amazing the fact that there's players, my players are in that book. And anyway, that's just fun. So here we go. The Tremere, Tzimisce, and Banu Haqim are always experimenting, always crafting, and always creating new rites of blood sorcery. Some are developed for unleashing, others are designed for protection of self and haven. Rituals might even find greater utilitarian use for investigation, transportation of messages via discrete means, or swift transit of the body or blood of the practitioner. So I want to point out something very neat on that one, is that it says specifically that the Tremere, the Tzimisce, and the Banu Haqim, there's nothing anywhere that states that the Tzimisce have access to this blood sorcery, which I think is sad because they damn well should. And the way that I've been doing it is basically there is a predator type located in the core book. And I know we're kind of jumping around, but I think when you're dealing with blood sorcery and everything that it has to deal with, that's kind of an important thing to actually stop and think about what you're doing with this. But when it comes to this, there is, I believe it is the bagger. Yes, the bagger. It says specifically, gain 1 dot of blood sorcery, Tremere only, or obfuscate. See, I would take out the Tremere only and say that the Banu Haqim and the Tzimisce could take that to help give them blood sorcery. But that is me, and that is how my game runs. So anybody who ends up playing Tzimisce in my game, if you take Bagger, you can definitely take blood sorcery as an in-clan discipline as well. So there's no reason why somebody can't have Dominate, Protean, and be a blood sorcerer at the same time. So looking at the rituals of Chicago, the Tremere have been refining their sorceress craft for centuries, and the Chicago chantry is no exception. Always the innovator, Nikolai and his chantry perfected a number of potent new blood sorcery rituals prior to his disappearance. Oh, Nikolai is gone? Sad face. I don't know. These rituals are still available to the Tremere of Chicago and their chosen allies. They may also be available to Kindred who received instruction from Nikolai in the past, provided valuable services to the chantry, or took the liberty of acquiring them during the chaos of the recent Tremere schism. Players may select these rituals at character creation or during the chronicle at storyteller discretion. That's very cool because it states that these are Chicago specific, that you need to have had some kind of connection with the Chicago chantry, whether or not you knew Nikolai in the past or you've studied there currently, or if you ripped them off during your running. Karna! And yeah, no, so that is pretty cool that is there and that is available. So, level 2, Calling the Aura's Remnants. This ritual allows the caster to speak with the residual psychic aura of someone who has died. Ingredients: a human corpse or the corpse of a destroyed vampire. Process: the ritual must be cast within 10 feet of the human corpse or the corpse of the destroyed vampire. System: a successful ritual test allows the caster to speak with the animate reflection of the deceased for one scene as if they were still alive. This communication is not with the deceased spirit and only has access to the memories of the deceased up to the time of death. The critical win extends the duration of the speech to the entire evening. That is That is so fucking interesting. Because I like the fact that it's not the Wraith. Because then you can actually have somebody who's fucking with the Wraith using Oblivion, but then also to be able to basically speak to the memory of the person as if they were still alive. Like, it's the part of them that doesn't know that they died, or at least knows up to the point where they died. I picture the body talking at this point, maybe being able to like sit up and move a little bit. I cannot remember what movie. Hellboy. Kind of the situation in Hellboy where he uses his the power of the saints' relics to raise bodies enough to be able to slightly move and talk to him. Where he like strapped it to his back at one point to get information. I like this, and it opens up a whole variety of ideas in my head for things that I want to do. Luckily, my NPC, Jonathan Harker, grew up in Golconda, Illinois, and was actually embraced in Chicago. So I might very well consider giving him this ritual, just because this seems right up his alley. Level, white. Hello, blindness, my old friend. I've come to speak to you again. Level 3. Eyes of the Past. This ritual shows what happened in the caster's present location at a specific time in the past up to 5 years ago. Ingredients: 1 drop of blood for each year the caster is trying to look backwards in time. 3 or more drops requires a rouse check. Process: the caster selects the location for their ritual, cuts their hand, and allows the drops of blood to spill on the earth. System: a successful ritual allows the caster to see what happened in their present location at the specific time of their selection, up to 5 years ago. The caster can see what happened in the past as if they had been standing where they are now. Duration is 1 scene with clarity of vision determined by the number of successes scored. So if you get 3 successes, you get 3 scenes. That's pretty freaking cool. The vampire cannot recall the vision with any clarity after the scene elapses, meaning the storyteller is not obliged to answer any questions about the vision after the time. A critical win permanently fixes the scene in their memory. That's really neat because of the idea of being able to forget what you saw. This is something where, again, Tremere need to just keep a notebook of shit that they're doing. You need a book of shadows. Level 3, illusion of peaceful death. This ritual heals obvious wounds on a corpse, causing a body to appear as though it died a natural death. Ingredients: a white feather. Process: the caster must symbolically dust the body with the white feather. System: a successful ritual test causes a corpse to appear as if they died a natural death. This ritual does not add blood to the corpse, but does reduce the chance that this blood loss will be discovered. Increase difficulty of all rolls to determine cause of death by 3. The body must have at least half its original blood for this ritual to succeed. A critical win increases the difficulty of all rolls to determine cause of death by 5. This is like a masquerade cover-up just gift from God. Like, seriously, being able to do this kind of shit is worth it. That's a damn good ritual. Level 3, gentle mind. This ritual fortifies the target's mind against frenzy. Ingredients: crystal glass, Kindred Vitae. Process: the caster shares blood with the target of the ritual, while the caster whispers quietly into the target's ear, weaving a temporary cage around the target's beast. System: the caster must share a glass of blood with the target. A successful ritual test grants the target a 4 dice bonus to resist frenzy for one scene. A critical win extends the duration to an evening. The caster must share blood with another and cannot cast this ritual upon themselves. This is very interesting because there is a ritual in the older systems where you had to take a nail and shove it through your palm, and it stopped you from frenzying. But you couldn't do it for other people. You could only do it for yourself. This one is almost the same ritual, but you can only do it for other people and not yourself. And I like the fact that it has the time restriction on it. I think this whole ritual is just a good idea all the way around. Level 3, the Unseen Change. This ritual forces lupines into their wolf form. Ingredients: wolf blood, kindred vitae, and a silver jug. Everybody has a silver jug. Process: the caster mixes kindred vitae with wolf's blood and pours the mixture from a silver jug around a specific area. This can be as small as a meter or large enough to encircle a house. System: the caster makes 3 rouse checks to summon the blood necessary for the ritual and marks out a closed area with the mixture of kindred vitae and wolf's blood. A successful ritual test forces all lupines crossing the threshold defined by the caster to automatically transform into their lupus form, unless they succeed on a contested willpower test against the caster's intelligence plus blood sorcery, or the number of successes scored on the initial ritual roll. If year-long, the ritual dissipates at dawn unless the initial ritual roll is made at a +2 difficulty. If successful, the ritual lasts for a year and a day. A critical win doubles the number of successes the lupine needs on its roll to defeat the ritual. The Unseen Change forces the target lupine into their form as a normal wolf, denying them the raw power of their dreaded half-wolf form. That is fucking awesome. There is an older ritual that kind of seems a little bit like this. I think it's actually just called the Stone of True Form, and it works on any shifters. I don't see why this wouldn't work on other shifters. It would suck to be a Korax or a Were-Raven in this situation. You get hit by this stuff and you just get put into a cage. Either way, I like this. This is a very interesting version of that ritual. Level 4, Innocence of the Child's Heart. Developed by Nikolai himself, this ritual allows the caster to conceal their kindred aura from the users of Auspex. Ingredients: a toy belonging to a mortal child. Process: the caster must acquire the toy of an innocent mortal child and use the ritual to mystically infuse it with the power of their kindred vitae, drawing the child's innocence into their aura. The caster must then carry the toy on their person to mask themselves from the powers of Auspex. System: the caster makes a rouse check and makes their ritual test. Upon success, the caster's aura is altered to make them appear mortal, with any stains of diablerie rendered invisible. Auspex users employing Scry the Soul on the caster will perceive their aura as mortal until the effects of the rituals dissipates, unless they make a contested roll between their intelligence plus Auspex versus the caster's intelligence plus blood sorcery plus 4 dice. Shit. The ritual lasts 1 night unless the ritual test is made at a +2 difficulty, which extends it until the end of the story. A critical win doubles the ritual's duration. Note that there is no recorded instance of Nikolai sharing this ritual with his fellow Tremere, and can only be learned by capturing Nikolai's notes or via other methods at storyteller discretion. the idea of the Tremere just stealing a toy from a child, because this is obviously not something that you can like head to the store and buy a toy. This needs to be something that's been infused with the child's love and innocence. Nikolai has always been just really fucked up, in my opinion. He's always been, I don't even like him as an NPC. And that's the thing, is like there are characters that you can go, wow, you're evil, but you're my favorite character. But like Nikolai is just a dick. And he came up with this too high diablerie. Tell me I'm wrong. You know? Level 4, rending the sweet earth. This ritual rends the earth to reveal vampires concealed by Protean. Ingredients: a leather whip and Kindred Vitae. Process: the caster locates the exact spot a user of Protean sank into the earth using earth meld. They then slit their palm, smearing the Vitae on the point of entry, repeatedly striking the ground with a leather whip. System: the caster makes a rouse check and a ritual test. Upon success, a 10-foot by 10-foot chasm opens, leading to a subterranean resting place of the vampire in the earth-melded state. The ritual automatically awakens the target if they are asleep, but will not do so if they are in torpor. A critical win opens the chasm without waking the target. I can see that being a more useful outcome, to not wake up the target. This is also a pretty interesting thing because it does bring into thought what happens to a vampire who goes into the earth. The way that it was described in the old system was it's almost like stepping into the Umbra, like the Guru do, like the werewolves do. But they basically meld in with the earth. They become one with it. They don't actually sink into the ground. Their body materializes into the ground itself. So the idea of them just splitting a hole and going, vampire, gangrel, down there, get it. Just, I don't know. It opens up thoughts on how the system is actually supposed to work in V5. Level 4, Protean Curse. This ritual transforms the target into a bat, similar to the level 4 Protean ability of Metamorphosis. Ingredients: a vial of rabid vampire bat blood, Kindred Vitae acquired from a vampire with the Protean discipline, and a string suspended puppet crafted from bat bones. Taking a break on that one, just hold tight. This ritual has been around for a very, very long time, and I only remember you needing a rabid vampire bat, or even just a rabid bat in general. This is going to take some doing, because first off, not every place in the world has vampire bats. Most of us have small insectivore bats, or fruit bats, or fishing bats even, but vampire bats are actually kind of hard to find. Making sure they have rabies means that you're probably injecting this thing with rabies. And the idea of getting blood from a vampire who already has Protean, fuck. This is going to be a difficult power to use. Process: the target must drink a vial of blood from a rabid vampire bat mixed with Kindred Vitae while the caster puppeteers the bone marionette. So you're just sitting there like sipping down your drink while you're playing with this thing? Just the fuck. System: the caster produces 2 rouse checks worth of their blood with associated roll required. That's the most formal way of saying 2 rouse checks. With the blood of a rabid vampire bat, and gives it to the target to drink. The ritual is cast, and upon a successful ritual roll, the target is transformed into a bat per Metamorphosis ability of Protean Discipline. The target may elect to resist this transformation with, I'm assuming that should be with, a stamina plus occult roll If the target rolls more successes than the ritual's practitioner, they prevent the transformation, while their total failure can leave them in a horrifically deformed half-human, half-bat state. I am assuming that that's what this is supposed to be. You fucked up the ritual. The half-bat creature gains +2 to strength, +1 to dexterity, +1 to stamina, +1 presence up to a maximum of 5, but cannot communicate verbally. Reduces its manipulation to 0 and takes 1 aggravated health damage for every turn exposed to bright light, artificial or otherwise. This ritual can be cast on both kindred and human and lasts for a full evening, or until the caster dispels the ritual via a successful ritual test. The duration of Protean Curse can be extended by making a rouse check and a successful ritual roll at the beginning of each night the caster wants to maintain the ritual. A critical win for the practitioner doubles the duration of Protean Curse, and the caster cannot use this ritual on themselves. That's, again, very interesting because in the old Protean's Curse, you did do this to yourself as just a way to turn into a bat, not as some kind of punishment. But I do kind of like the whole insidiousness of, I'm going to turn you into a bat, keep you in a cage. Mwahaha. That's just interesting. I actually did have I had a gangrel who was kidnapped by a Tremere in Raven form one time in a cage with Ward versus Vampire on the cage. So they were in it, but couldn't do anything to get out. And because they were stuck in a small form and they couldn't touch the bars, they were just stuck in Raven form until they were rescued. It was a lot of fun. Moving on. Rituals from the Milwaukee chantry. The Tremere of Milwaukee were carefully selected for their sorcerous might and potential to penetrate the mysteries of the enigmatic null zone surrounding Marquette University. Karna's schism and the disappearance of Victor and Dr. Motius shortly thereafter left the chantry empty, but their rituals endured. This is interesting because I'm getting a lot of lore on this. Level 3, Sanguine Watcher. This ritual forms a small rat out of Kindred Vitae that goes wherever the caster instructs and observes whatever the caster desires. Ingredients: Kindred Vitae, small quantities of alcohol, and a silver bowl. There's that silver bowl again. Process: the ritual is cast over the course of 20 minutes, while the caster fills a silver bowl with vitae and measured doses of alcohol. The rat made of blood slowly forms as the caster stirs the mixture, becoming ever more solid until it scampers out of the bowl to serve its master. System: a successful ritual test summons a rodent made of kindred blood from the bowl that is bound to the caster and allows them to see through its eyes. The rat will go wherever the caster instructs it to go and observe whatever the caster tells it to look for. The rat can be instructed to steal small items, but the caster must be very explicit as to what they want stolen and where it is located. The rat remains in service until sunrise. A critical win allows the caster to provide the creature with extremely precise instructions. I have mixed feelings on this Sanguine Watcher discipline. First off, I would imagine that you would need a rat's body, like a dead rat, pump it full of your blood, and then I'm okay with the rest of the ritual as is. However, if you are making a rat out of your own blood, I think it should be able to have more of a mental connection with you. Like, you should be able to tell it things and it just knows what you mean without you having to be precise. But personal thoughts on how I would have done things. And we are back to another ritual that was originally Sabat. Level 3, Bladed Hands. This ritual sharpens the caster's hands into razor's edges. Ingredients: a pair of razor blades, 2 drops of Kindred Vitae. Process: the caster places the razor blade in each palm, gripping them tightly as the ritual is cast. At the end of the ritual, they vanish into the caster's person, leaving a pair of supernaturally sharp hands in their wake. System: the caster must make a successful ritual test and 2 rouse checks. Success turns the caster's hands into light piercing brawl weapons with a +2 damage modifier. The caster must be very careful about what they touch while employing bladed hands. +1 difficulty to all rolls to handle delicate objects. A critical win increases the damage to +3. The ritual lasts for a single evening. Do not make balloon animals with this fucking ritual. I really wish there was more of an idea of what it looks like. Do your hands look like do you turn into like almost like Edward Scissorhands kind of thing? I really do wish there was more of an explanation of how this looks. Or is it like your hands look normal, but if you touch anything, it shreds it? I don't know. But this was originally a Sabbat ritual. It's interesting that the chantry in Milwaukee have it. Level 3, Illusion of Perfection. This ritual shrouds the caster in the illusion of a nondescript person that blends easily into crowds. Ingredients: a plain white mask, Vitae from Kindred with the discipline Obfuscate, and a chameleon skin. Ew. Don't skin my lizards. Seriously. Process: the caster performs an hour-long ritual that concludes when they don the featureless white mask and consume the concoction of Vitae and lizard skin. Chameleon bacon. A sweat of blood forms under the mask, spreading across the caster's body until they're coated in a rubbery crust that mystically conceals their true identity. The mask itself slowly turns crimson until the ritual wears off. System: a successful ritual test is required to activate this ritual. Upon success, the caster is cloaked in the illusion that they are an ordinary person in their mid-20s with a nondescript face and average body similar to that of Obfuscate ability Mask of 1,000 Faces. The nondescript appearance of the vampire shifts across different faces, seen as different by individuals who can all see the caster. This can, of course, lead to confusion and alarm. The caster can only see their own reflection in mirrors and photographs. Illusion of Perfection can be pierced by the Auspex ability Sense the Unseen, with the contest of wits plus Auspex versus the success scored on the ritual roll. Illusion of Perfection lasts 1 scene, but a critical win extends its duration for the entire evening. I really personally think Illusion of Perfection should just be an all-night thing. I don't think you should have to get a critical, because I mean that would just suck for 1 scene kind of situation. Is anybody else reminded of the movie A Scanner Darkly with Robert Downey Jr. and Winona Ryder and Keanu Reeves with this? Just the idea of it constantly shifting because you can't identify a person. That's a very interesting thing there. Level 3, Haunted House. This ritual creates the illusion that a vampire's haven is haunted. Ingredients: Vitae from a kindred who possesses the discipline of Obfuscate. Process: the caster places a drop of kindred blood on all entrances and exits of the haven, in addition to all exterior walls and the roof, over the course of a 3-hour ritual. System: the caster makes 3 rouse checks in addition to the ritual test. Upon success, The haven assumes an ominous cast, and rumors begin to circulate that the house is haunted. Casual passerbys will avoid the house at all costs, and even the most courageous mortals will think twice about entering. Mortals attempting to enter the haven must make a successful composure plus resolve test against the number of successes the caster made on the original ritual roll. Success indicates that they can enter, while failure bars their passage, although they can spend willpower to enter a turn. So I guess you can walk in and walk out. The effects of Haunted House lasts for 10 years, after which the haven appears strange and run down, but not haunted. Dr. Mortius spent decades crafting this ritual with vampires of Clan Ravno, inspiring Clan Tremere to forbid its use as a threat of the Masquerade and their power. But knowledgeable Kindred may be willing to share it with others for a price. That is interesting, because while I'm reading it, I'm just like, this is just a fucking Masquerade breach. You're gonna get the fucking ghost hunters and shit like that's gonna show up. You're gonna get, like, and I'm not just talking about hunters as in people who hunt things. I'm talking about the television show Ghost Hunters is gonna show up to your haven and want in. This is an interesting thing. It actually reminds me of, I'm pretty damn sure, I could be wrong on this one, but it reminds me very, very, very much of, it's either a Khaldunic ritual, or it may very well be a ritual that was only found in Dirty Secrets of the Black Hand. All I know is I've seen this ritual before, and I don't think it was accessible to Tremere. But that is what we have in the Chicago Folios. But don't worry, we have one more stop to make. Welcome to the Fall of London. Now, in the Fall of London, I love this picture. This is thaumaturgy all over it. In the Fall of London, there are no actual rituals that can be found except for one. And that is what we are here to look at. And that is the ritual of transferring the soul. This is a very long, convoluted ritual, and it could be really considered either an amalgam of blood sorcery and oblivion, or an amalgam of oblivion and blood sorcery. Take that as you will, but it was developed by Sir Roger de Camden, the Chamberlain of Mithras of London. And this is just a ritual that is so good that I cannot skip it. You guys have to hear this. So, ritual of transferring the soul. The ritual of transferring the soul is a particularly complex working of blood sorcery and ceremonial oblivion. Invented by Roger de Camden, which has only ever been used once before by de Camden himself to escape the Giovanni hunt on members of Clan Cappadocian. So we are looking at a ritual that is about half a millennia old. The first part of the ritual involves a series of preparatory steps. During each step, the subject of the ritual chants and meditates while holding an object of great emotional significance, imbuing the object with a portion of their own spiritual essence. So, does anybody else think that Roger de Camden very well might be Voldemort and we're dealing with Horcruxes? It gets better. The next part of the process requires the subject to be deoblerized by another vampire. Preferably, the new vampire should be of much younger age, higher generation, and lower blood potency to the subject, so that the subject can more easily take over the new body. I just got to give my commentary in between these things, but does this not seem like the meanest trick a Salubri has ever played on their child? The last part of the ritual is then enacted by bringing the new body together with the objects that were primed earlier. Each object returned restores some of the subject's original blood potency and improves their control over the host body. Here is where things get risky though. For Mithras, unchallenged prince of London, and God in his own mind never expected to need the ritual and never primed any artifacts. Fortunately, de Camden was able to identify 5 objects that he believes hold enough significance to Mithras to work. If it does, and de Camden is fairly certain it will, it's through a sheer combination of de Camden being the ritual's creator, him knowing Mithras so well, and Mithras' personality and blood potency being strong enough to prime artifacts without effort. If the 5 artifacts are successfully used in the ritual, Mithras will regain his full original blood potency and will have total control over his new body. Henceforth, the real Montgomery Coven will cease to exist. This poor Assamite anti-tribute who got lucky and diablerized Mithras is getting fucked even further. If any of the artifacts are not found and returned, then this will mean that de Camden will have to make do with whatever is left. The ritual can be complicated, but would return Mithras to a less powerful state, something more in line with other surviving elders in the modern age. Mithras himself will be far from happy with this, but he is pragmatic enough to take what he can get. I get the whole situation with Mithras, with the whole like I'm stuck in a neonate Assamite, but he didn't prime shit. This is his fault. Especially because I can't see with the bromance going on between Mithras and de Camden that there's no way in hell that Mithras didn't know about this ritual and that it was already being set up just in case. Because you got to read their history. It's pretty fucked up. Now, these 5 items that we have are a chalice, what looks like a little peasant's cap, strangely enough, a dagger, a ring, and what looks like a seal for a wax set. So let's go ahead and look at the performing of the ritual part on this one, because this is an interesting thing that this ritual is created for this reason, for the fall of London, and yeah. The information presented here primarily for storyteller benefit, to help them better tell the story of the fall of London. However, it is possible that Roger de Camden could be given cause to teach the ritual to the characters, or to other kindred versed in blood sorcery. The ritual of transferring the soul is a 5th level combined blood sorcery ritual and oblivion ceremony that requires 2 kindred participants. One who knows the requisite level of blood sorcery and another who is versed in oblivion. It is possible for a single kindred who possesses both to perform the ritual alone. Woot! Goals, I guess. Life goals. Performing the ritual requires a rouse check and successes in both an intelligence plus blood sorcery difficulty of 6 and an intelligence plus oblivion test difficulty of 6. Once the ritual has been performed successfully, to imbue the selected objects with the subject's essence, combining the objects again to restore the subject's power, requires the subject to come in contact with them again. Multiple objects must be used, at least 5, as no single object is capable of storing all the vampire's essence. Theoretically, however, any number of objects could be used in this process, with the power conveyed by each object relative to the number of objects used. The power restored to this subject is similar, proportional to the number of objects combined in the ritual's final phase. Importantly, this combination can only be performed once, so any missing objects become inert and the remaining essence contained within each is forever lost. It is also possible to break the link between the objects and the subject by performing another instance of the ritual while in possession of the objects, but before the subject can complete the final incantation. A successful casting releases the essence within each object present, rendering them useless. So there we have it. That was our look at Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition Blood Sorcery, with some very interesting information in there. There is some stuff that says that the thaumaturgy rituals presented in Cult of the Blood God could very well be used by the Tremere. Laura Flame specifically says that it's from them. There's some old Sabbat rituals which have been brought over to this edition but are being used as open season depending on what chantry you're from. And then there's that wonderful little thing about Mithroths and being able to come back from Diablerie on purpose and not just by whim. I like the idea also that your objects contain bits of your power and that you can gain things back by collecting your, and I'm just gonna say it, your Horcruxes, because it's very similar. It's probably inspired by that. But the idea that, and see, the way that I was reading it at first made it seem like your blood potency level is connected to each of those items. So depending on how many items you have really also comes into consideration of who is diablerizing you. This is so good for a cult to have, if you think about it, because if they can catch, and I want to point out something. I know very little the Fall of London yet, and I plan to. If anybody wants to start up conversations about it, by all means, go for it. I'm excited to read it. I just haven't had that big of a chance to, because with the way that the world is going, my life is starting to open up in other areas, and actually spending time working on game, I don't have as much time as I would like as it comes to that. But the idea that having to catch Montgomery Coven to get him in contact with the items that are dispersed that the characters have to find, that's just a scavenger hunt that just seems like such a great idea. That just seems like a fun plot line to run, and I might very well have to utilize the Cult of Mithras in my own game for these purposes, even though we're set in Portland, Oregon, because shit travels, right? Items can get lost, and who knows who has what. The gathering of those materials to perform the ritual could be a very, very fun project to work on, but we're in the middle of Project Ragnarok right now, so I don't really have time to think about that kind of thing. Anyway, I am Voivode Maquette. This has been our World of Darkness, and I need to go get a drink. Good evening. Rituals, 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 rituals. You say a word enough and it just doesn't make any sense.